In the crushing emptiness of space, silence isn't a mercy. It's a death sentence. And for the crew of the recovery vessel Lucky Strike, silence was the sound of their supplies slowly bleeding out. The hum from the oxygen recyclers was just a little too quiet. The vibration from the engines felt just a little too weak. They were a small, forgotten ship running on fumes and borrowed time, tasked with picking the bones of vessels far grander than their own. Their ship was dying, a slow creep of decay measured in flickering lights and rationed water. Then one day the silence broke. It wasn't the roar of a warship or the clean signal of a friendly. It was a whisper. A ghost in the machine. A signal so faint, so alien, it was almost nothing. And for the desperate crew of the Lucky Strike, that whisper would force a choice. Cling to their own fading chance of survival, or risk it all for a total stranger. Out here, the math was simple and cruel. Every drop of fuel, every liter of oxygen, every calorie of food was a number in an equation that had to add up to one thing: getting home. There was no room for error, no margin for charity. The universe doesn't care about good intentions. So, when a signal that didn't even register on standard frequencies started pinging on their deep-range sensors, the first instinct was to write it off. A glitch, a solar flare, a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost. It was a tomb, a tiny escape capsule, adrift and alone. Inside, a single life sign, weak but stable, was ticking down its last hours. The cost to reach it was catastrophic. The fuel burn would leave them stranded. The time lost would push their life support past the point of no return. The logical thing to do, the sane thing, was to turn away. Leave the stranger to their fate and save themselves. But the crew of the Lucky Strike wasn't entirely sane, and they definitely weren't logical. They were human, and they had long memories. The Lucky Strike was nobody's idea of a flagship. She was a dented, grimy hauler that had seen better decades, a vulture that fed on the carcasses of the void. And her crew? They were much the same. Captain Jacques wasn't military. He was an ex-asteroid miner with more debt than prospects, a man who knew the cold math of risk and reward better than anyone. His face was a roadmap of close calls and bad bets, but his eyes held a weariness that went deeper than just being tired. He commanded the Lucky Strike not with rigid discipline, but with a shared, quiet desperation. His second in command was Lisa, a brilliant but disgraced engineer blacklisted from every major corporation in the sector. She could make a failing engine sing with just a wrench and a string of curses. Her hands were perpetually stained with grease, her mind always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. She was the one who kept the Lucky Strike breathing, coaxing its dying systems through one more cycle. Then there was Bobby Clark, the ship's doctor. An older man who'd lost his practice and his family, he signed on for the long, quiet tours to escape the ghosts of his past. He was the ship's heart, patching up their scrapes, listening to their fears, and reminding them they were more than just scavengers. They were a crew of the forgotten, held together by the simple fact that this ship was their last and only chance. Their resources were already in the red. The protein paste was tasting more like plastic, the recycled water had a metallic tang, and low oxygen warnings were becoming part of the ship's daily chorus. It was Lisa who caught it first. "Captain!" Her voice cut through the low hum of the bridge. "I've got something weird. Deep-range, non-standard frequency. It's almost lost in the background noise." Jacques walked to her console, boots clanking on the worn metal deck. He stared at the screen, at the tiny, erratic spike in the data. "A pulsar?" "Negative," Lisa said, her fingers flying across the keypad. "It's artificial. A repeating pattern. Barely a whisper, but it's there. It's a distress call." Bobby, who'd been running diagnostics on the medbay's nutrient synthesizer, came onto the bridge. "Distress out here? Who'd be stupid enough to be in the Whisper Nebula?" "That's the thing," Lisa said, a frown creasing her brow. "It's not from a ship. Too weak. It's a pod, an escape capsule. And judging by the signal degradation, it's been out here a while. Jock's face hardened. He knew what that meant. A pod runs on borrowed time. Any ID? Nothing I recognize, Lisa admitted. The tech is completely alien, but I'm getting a bioscan. One life sign. Faint. Heartbeat is slow, but it's stable. For now. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The three of them stood there, staring at the screen, the ghost of a signal pulsing like a dying heart. They all knew the math. The nebula was a graveyard. Getting to the pod meant burning fuel they didn't have for the trip home. It meant pushing their already failing life support to its absolute limit. It was a choice between almost certain death for a stranger and a slightly less certain death for themselves. We can't, Bobby said softly, his voice thick with a pragmatism that felt like a betrayal. Jacques, you know the numbers. We're already on empty. We try this and we won't have enough fuel to get out of the nebula, let alone make it to port. Jacques didn't answer. He just stared at the blinking light on the screen. He didn't see a blip of data. He saw a person, trapped in a metal coffin, waiting for an end that was coming with chilling certainty. He thought of all the times he'd been trapped in his own way. He thought of Lisa, cast out, of Bobby, haunted by the lives he couldn't save. They'd all been left to die before. Lisa, Jacques said, his voice quiet but firm. Plot a course. Bobby stared at him, his face a mix of disbelief and fear. Captain, you're not serious. This is suicide. Maybe, Jacques said, turning to face his doctor. But leaving someone to die alone when you could have helped, that's not suicide. That's something worse. He paused, his gaze sweeping over his small, tattered crew. We used to have a saying back home. No one left behind. It was supposed to be about our own people. But out here, maybe our people is just anyone who's in the dark. The decision hung in the air, thick and heavy as the nebula's dust clouds. This wasn't a command to be followed blindly. It was a pact, a shared acceptance of an insane risk. Bobby, ever the voice of reason, kept protesting. Jacques, listen to me, he pleaded, holding up a datapad showing their resource levels. The bars for fuel, oxygen, and food were all screaming red. This isn't a guess. It's a fact. We divert and our life support fails in 72 hours. Our engines will give out shortly after. We'll be just another ghost in this nebula. For what? A signal we can barely read? Lisa, who had been silently running simulations, swiveled in her chair. He's right, Captain. The odds are not good. My most optimistic projection gives us a 4% chance of reaching the pod, getting the occupant, and making it to a trade lane before we're dead in the water. 4%, Bobby repeated, his voice strained. You're betting our lives on 4%. Jacques walked to the main viewport, staring out at the swirling chaos of ionized gas and dark matter. The nebula's beauty was a cruel mirage, hiding the radiation and gravitational shears that had torn countless ships apart. When I was a kid, he began, his voice low, my whole town worked the iridium mines on Cygnus X1. Company town. They owned our homes, our store, our lives. One season, profits were down, so they cut costs on safety inspections for the deep shafts. Everyone knew it was dangerous. But what choice did we have? Work or starve? He paused, the memory still raw. There was a collapse. Shaft 9 went down. 30 miners trapped. My father was one of them. The company did the math. A rescue was more expensive than the insurance payout for the dead. So they sealed the mine, declared it a tragic accident, wrote them all off. Lisa and Bobby were silent. They left them to die, Jacques continued, his voice hardening. 30 people, suffocating in the dark because a number on a spreadsheet said their lives weren't worth it. I remember standing at the gates, listening to the silence, knowing my father was down there, knowing someone made a choice. He turned to face them, his eyes burning with an old fire. That blinking light on your screen, Lisa? That's Shaft 9. It's some poor soul suffocating in the dark. And we're the ones at the gate. We get to make the choice. He looked at Bobby. You're right. It's 4%. It's insane. But the math that says we should leave them to die is the same math that sealed that mine. and I stopped believing in that kind of math a long time ago. Bobby's shoulders slumped. He looked from Jacques to Lisa and saw two people who knew what it was to be abandoned. He had retreated to space because the world back home had no place for a broken doctor. They were all survivors of a system that chose efficiency over empathy. "All right, Jacques," Bobby sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "All right. What's the plan?" A wave of relief passed over Jacques' face. "Lisa, you're on approach. Find us the safest path through this mess. I don't care what tricks you have to pull. Conserve every drop of fuel." "On it, Captain," she said, her fingers already a blur. The Lucky Strike shuddered as its thrusters fired, turning its nose away from safety and toward the heart of the nebula. "Bobby," Jacques said, "get the med bay ready. We have no idea what we're pulling out of there. Could be hostile, could be carrying a plague. Its biology could be totally incompatible with our air. I need you to prepare for every worst-case scenario." "I'll have to recalibrate every scanner we have," Bobby mused, his mind already shifting from protest to problem-solving. "Isolate the bay, run a full atmospheric check. I'll get it done." The Lucky Strike pushed deeper into the beautiful, deadly clouds. Alarms blared as Lisa expertly dodged radiation pockets and sudden gravity wells. The ship groaned, its aging hull protesting every move, a constant reminder of the gamble they were taking, chasing a ghost on borrowed time. The trip to the pod was controlled chaos. Lisa was a virtuoso at the helm, her eyes darting between a dozen screens. She used the gravity wells of collapsing stars to slingshot the ship forward, saving precious fuel. She skimmed the edges of radiation clouds, pushing the shields to their absolute limit. The ship creaked and groaned, its lights flickering with every sudden turn, as if the old vessel was dying faster. "Hull integrity at 87%, Lisa shouted over a shrieking alarm. "Just scraped past a rogue asteroid cluster. This place is a junkyard. How's the life sign?" Jacques asked, his knuckles white on the arms of his chair. Bobby's voice came over the link from the med bay. "Still there. Heart rate's dropping, though. Whatever life support it has is failing fast. We're running out of time." After an eternity, Lisa brought the ship to a careful halt. "I have it," she breathed, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. "Visuals on screen!" There it was, floating in the eerie silence. A small angular capsule made of a matte black material that seemed to drink the nebula's faint light. No markings they recognized, no docking port, no airlock. It was a seamless alien coffin. "Okay, Lisa, bring us in slow," Jacques ordered. "That's our next problem, Captain," she said, zooming in. "There's no docking mechanism. No external hatch. Our clamps have nothing to grip. Can you cut it open?" "Absolutely not," Lisa shot back. "The hull is giving off weird energy readings. I hit it with a plasma torch. I could breach its life support, irradiate the occupant, or even set off a catastrophic detonation. They had come all this way, burned through their future, only to be stopped meters from their goal." Jacques' mind raced. "Can't cut, can't dock. How do we get them out?" His eyes scanned the bridge and fell on the forward cargo bay schematics. A desperate, crude idea began to form. "Lisa," he said slowly, "the forward salvage rig, the one for pulling in debris. Can you modify it?" Her eyes widened. "You want to build an improvised docking collar? Out of spare parts?" "Captain, that's insane. The tolerances would have to be perfect. One wrong move and we crush the pod." "The biosigns are fading," Jacques pressed. "We're out of elegant solutions, Lisa. We need a solution that works right now. Can you do it?" Lisa stared at the schematics, her mind already taking the rig apart and putting it back together. It was a clumsy, brutal piece of equipment, made for brute force, not surgery. "But maybe—" "It's a long shot," she said, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. "I'll have to bypass half the safety protocols and fabricate a new sealing ring from scrap. It'll be ugly, but it might just work." "Do it," Jacques ordered. For the next hour, the Lucky Strike was a frantic workshop. Lisa, directing the ship's external robotic arms, began transforming the salvage rig. She stripped off the heavy grappling claws and repurposed their magnetic bases. She welded scrap hull plating into a rough collar. The whole time, Bobby's voice was a grim metronome over the comms. Heart rate is now critical. I'm detecting atmospheric leakage from the pod. It's losing air. Almost there, Bobby, Lisa muttered, her focus absolute. She guided the newly formed collar toward the alien pod. It had to be snug enough to form a seal, but not so tight it would crack the fragile craft. Easy, Lisa. Easy, Jockey whispered. There was a soft thud and the deep hum of magnetic clamps engaging. For a terrifying second, nothing. Then a green light blinked on Lisa's console. Seal is holding, she announced, her voice trembling with exhaustion and triumph. We have a hard dock. It's not pretty, but it's airtight. Open the airlock, Jacques commanded, already moving. Bobby, meet me in the cargo bay. Let's see who we just bet our lives on. The cargo bay was cold and still. Jacques and Bobby stood before the inner airlock, both in full environmental suits. Pressurizing the corridor. Lisa's voice crackled in their helmets. Atmosphere is stable. You're clear to open the inner hatch. Jock hit the release. With a heavy hiss, the door slid open, revealing the featureless outer hatch of the alien capsule. No way to open this either, Bobby observed, running a scanner over it. No handle, no keypad. There, Jacques said, pointing to a small, almost invisible seam. He pushed. It didn't budge. He pushed harder. Nothing. Frustrated, he balled his hand into a fist and banged it on the alien metal. With a soft chime and a whisper of hydraulics, a section of the door retracted. Jacques and Bobby exchanged a look of stunned surprise. It had opened with a knock. The air that wafted out was thin and frigid, smelling of ozone and something faintly metallic. The interior was dark, lit by a few dying red lights. And there, slumped in a single chair, was the survivor. It was massive, easily over 7 feet tall, even sitting down, with a powerful reptilian build covered in fine dark gray scales. It wore a tattered dark blue uniform with insignia that spoke of military rank and a long, hard war. One of its arms was held at an awkward angle, a dark purplish liquid staining the fabric near the shoulder. Its head was tilted forward, face obscured by shadows, but even unconscious, it radiated a powerful sense of dignity. This was a warrior. For a moment they were frozen. First contact happening in the cargo bay of a dying scrap hauler in the middle of nowhere. No fanfare, no ceremony. Bobby was the first to snap out of it. Let's get him to the med bay, now! Moving the alien was a struggle. It was dense with muscle and heavier than it looked. As they lifted it, its head rolled back, revealing a face with strong, sharp features and a thin, lipless mouth. They got the giant onto a hover stretcher and rushed it to the sealed med bay. Lisa, how are we doing? Jacques asked into his comm. Not great, she replied, her voice strained. The fuel we used getting here and docking, it cost more than I calculated. We have maybe 48 hours of life support, tops. Jacques looked at the unconscious alien on the medical table. They'd done it. They'd pulled this being from the brink. But in doing so, they'd almost certainly sealed their own fate. Bobby was a whirlwind of motion, attaching biomonitors to the alien's chest and head. The screen filled with a jumble of alien biology. Okay. Heart rate is dangerously slow, but it's a strong beat. Respiration is shallow. Body temp is way below human norms, but that might be natural, he narrated. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, oxygen deprivation. The wound on his shoulder. It's a plasma burn, and it's badly infected. He prepared a broad-spectrum antibiotic. This is a total shot in the dark. Our medicine could be poison to him. But without it, this infection will kill him. He injected the fluid. They watched the monitors. For a tense minute, nothing. Then, slowly, the alien's heart rate ticked up by a few beats. It's working, Bobby breathed. He had saved a life. It didn't matter whose. It was a life. Jacques watched the stoic, unconscious face of the soldier they'd rescued. He saw the scars of old battles etched into its scales, the exhaustion in the lines around its closed eyes. He felt a strange kinship with this silent warrior. They were both just survivors. He'd made an impossible choice, and now he was facing the consequences. But looking at the alien, he couldn't find an ounce of regret. They did the right thing. And in the cold, empty darkness, sometimes that's the only thing that matters. The lucky strike drifted in the silent nebula, its own lifeblood dwindling with every second. On board, a new, unsteady heartbeat joined the rhythm of the dying ship. The crew had done it. They had stared into the void and chosen compassion. They had risked their ship, their lives for one single alien soul. Their story would probably end here, in the quiet darkness, another ghost ship in a cosmic graveyard. There would be no parades, no medals. Their sacrifice would go unrecorded, their names forgotten by the galaxy that had already cast them aside. But the story of the lucky strike was never really about the destination. It wasn't about surviving to see another port or cashing in one last score. It was about a small, forgotten crew who were given a choice: obey the cruel math of survival or listen to the faint, irrational whisper of their own humanity. They chose humanity. They chose to believe that no one, not even a stranger from a distant star, should have to die alone in the dark. In the vast, cold, logical universe, the crew of a dying ship made a deeply illogical choice. They did what was right, not what was easy. And in that single defiant act of empathy, their ship may have been dying, but they had never been more alive.